They chose my sister's weekend getaway over my doctoral graduation after 8 years of work. When my car died in a blizzard, Mom texted to say I should not bother them. I was sobbing when my phone buzzed again. It was my startup's CFO. The opening share price was $45. I was officially the majority shareholder. That was the moment I realized the days of being their financial safety net were finally over. My name is Noelle Harrow. I am 32 years old, and as I stood on the polished oak stage of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the weight of the velvet hood around my neck felt less like a mark of distinction and more like a heavy, suffocating yoke. The dean was reading my name aloud, his voice booming through the cavernous auditorium, pronouncing each syllable of Doctor of Philosophy in Computer Science, with a gravitas that should have sent shivers of pride down my spine. The applause was polite, a ripple of noise from strangers who were waiting for their own children or siblings to walk across the stage. I paused for the obligatory photograph, clutching the diploma holder that represented 8 years of sleepless nights, caffeine-fueled coding marathons, and a dissertation that pushed the boundaries of algorithmic efficiency. I did not smile for the camera. Instead, my eyes automatically drifted past the blinding stage lights, seeking out Section E, Row 12, seats 4 and 5. They were empty. In a sea of beaming parents, waving siblings, and weeping grandparents, those 2 vacant seats were black holes that swallowed the light around them. I had reserved them 6 months ago. I had confirmed them 2 weeks ago. I had reminded my mother and father just yesterday. But as I walked across the stage, shaking the hand of a man I barely knew, reality settled in my gut like a stone. They were not just late, they were not coming. The memory of the phone call from the night before played in my head, drowning out the cheers of the graduating class. My mother's voice had been frantic, breathless, but not because of an emergency. She was out of breath because she was moving furniture. "Noelle, honey, we can't make the drive up to Cambridge," she had said, her tone breezy, as if canceling my doctoral graduation was the same as rescheduling a dentist appointment. Tiffany found this perfect loft downtown for her new vlog series, but the lighting is all wrong. We have to help her paint the accent wall before the sun goes down tomorrow, or she misses her content schedule. You understand, right? You're so smart. You don't need us there just to watch you walk in a circle. I walked off the stage, the applause fading behind me, and exited the auditorium through a side door. I stripped off the gown and hood in the hallway, stuffing them unceremoniously into my tote bag. There were families hugging all around me, fathers handing bouquets of roses to daughters, mothers wiping tears from their cheeks. I kept my head down, navigating the crowd like a ghost, invisible and unwanted. Outside, the Massachusetts weather had decided to match my internal landscape. A nor'easter had swept in earlier than predicted, turning the sky a bruised shade of charcoal. The wind bit through my thin coat, carrying stinging pellets of ice that were rapidly turning into a full-blown blizzard. I trudged toward the parking lot, my boots crunching on the salting pavement. My car was a 2004 gray sedan, a rust bucket I had bought for $800 during my sophomore year. It had a taped-up bumper and a heater that smelled faintly of burning hair. I called it the Toad. It was ugly, reliable, and the only thing I could afford because every spare dollar I earned from my teaching assistant stipend went straight to my parents' joint account. I slid into the driver's seat, shivering as the cold leather seeped through my clothes. I turned the key. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died. I tried again. A grinding noise, then silence. My stomach dropped. I glanced at the dashboard. The battery light flickered weakly. I pounded the steering wheel, a single, sharp frustration escaping my throat. I was stranded. The campus was emptying out, but I was parked in the overflow lot, a good half-mile from the main buildings, and the snow was coming down harder now, erasing the world in a wash of white. I reached for my purse to grab my wallet and call a tow truck, but my hand met only the fabric of the bag lining. I froze. My wallet was on my kitchen counter. I had taken it out to scan my ID for the online registration yesterday and forgot to put it back. I pulled out my phone. 7% battery. The cold was already seeping into the cabin, turning my breath into white puffs of fog. I had no AAA membership because I had let it lapse to pay for Tiffany's emergency dental veneers last month. I had no cash. I had a 7% battery and a car that was rapidly becoming a freezer. I had no choice. I scrolled to the contact labeled Mom and Dad and hit the dial. It rang 4 times, 5 times. I pictured them in Tiffany's new apartment, perhaps holding up color swatches, laughing as they moved a designer sofa that cost more than my car. The call went to voicemail. I dialed again. Then I dialed my father. Voicemail. I dialed Tiffany. She picked up on the second ring, but she wasn't talking to me. Okay, guys. So for the lighting here, we are thinking of sunset vibes, her voice chirped, clearly speaking to a camera or a live stream. Tiffany? I said, my voice trembling from the cold. Tiffany, put Mom on. It's an emergency. Ugh, hold on, Tiffany said, her voice dropping the influence of sweetness instantly. Mom, it's Noelle. She is interrupting the flow. There was a shuffling sound, and then my mother's voice came on the line. She sounded annoyed. Noelle, we are in the middle of a shoot. Tiffany has a deadline for her sponsors. What is it? Mom, I'm stuck, I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. My car died. I'm in the overflow lot at campus. Ideally, I need a tow, but I forgot my wallet. Can you call a service for me? Or, are you close enough to come get me? It's snowing really hard. Oh, Noelle, she sighed, a sound that conveyed deep exhaustion with my existence. We are in the city, that is 2 hours away in this weather, and we can't leave. Tiffany needs us to hold the reflectors. Just call a friend. You must have friends. I don't have anyone else to call. Mom, my battery is dying. Please, it's freezing out here. I can't talk right now. Noelle, Tiffany is signaling me. Figure it out. You are a genius, aren't you? The line went dead. I stared at the phone, stunningly unable to comprehend the cruelty. Surely she didn't mean it. Surely. Once she put the phone down and realized her daughter was stranded in a blizzard. She would call back. 2 minutes later, a text message notification chimed. I looked at the screen. The sender was Loving Family. I opened the message. The words were bright and sharp against the white background. Don't expect help. Dad and I are busy helping Tiffany decorate. You are grown up. Call roadside assistance yourself. Don't bother us, and do not disturb your sister's joy. I read it once, then I read it again. Something inside me, something that had been holding on by a frayed thread for 30 years, finally snapped. It wasn't a loud explosion. It was a quiet, structural collapse. I sat in the freezing car, the windows now completely obscured by snow, and I didn't feel the cold anymore. I felt a burning, acidic clarity. I thought about the years I spent tutoring spoiled undergraduates to pay for my father's gambling debts. I thought about the time I ate instant noodles for 6 months straight so I could send money for Tiffany's modeling portfolio photos, which turned out to be a scam. I thought about the graduation ceremony today, where I walked alone while other parents screamed their children's names until they were hoarse. Don't expect help? That was their summary of my life. I was the resource. I was at the ATM. I was the safety net. But when I was the one falling, they cut the rope. I started to cry. It wasn't a whimper. It was a deep, heaving sob that shook my entire body. I cried for the little girl who tried to get straight, as hoping it would make them look at her the way they looked at Tiffany. I cried for the woman who just became a doctor of philosophy and had no one to tell. I cried because I was 32 years old, and I was an orphan with living parents. My phone buzzed in my hand. 1% battery left. I wiped my eyes, expecting another text from Tiffany telling me to stop being dramatic, but the name on the screen wasn't family. It was David. David barely ever called. As the chief financial officer of Etheria Systems, he preferred encrypted emails and secure messaging apps. We had built Etheria in the shadows. For 5 years, I was the ghost in the machine. I wrote the code. I designed the architecture. I built the neural networks that were currently revolutionizing data processing. But I stayed off the masthead. I stayed anonymous. I told everyone I was a freelance coder or a consultant. I did it to protect my money from them. I knew if my parents knew I was a founder, they would drain me dry. I slid the answer button. Noel? David's voice was unlike I had ever heard it. Usually, he was calm, collected, a man of spreadsheets and risk assessments. Today, his voice was vibrating. Are you sitting down? My car broke down. David, I choked out, my voice thick with tears. I'm stranded in a blizzard. He didn't hear me, or he didn't care. The adrenaline in his voice was a physical force. Listen to me. The market just closed. The IPO, Noel, it didn't just stabilize, it skyrocketed. The bell rang 10 minutes ago. I sniffled, wiping my nose with the back of my woolen glove. Okay, that's good. Is it good? Good? David laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated disbelief. Noel, we opened at $18. We closed at $45 a share. $45. I sat very still. The wind howled outside, shaking the frame of my rusted sedan. I did the math in my head. I didn't need a calculator. I owned 450,000 shares. David, I whispered. I am looking at the capitalization table right now, David said, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper. Your stake, as of this minute, it is worth $20,250,000. The number hung in the air between us. $20 million. And Noel, David continued, the lockup period clause? The one the board tried to fight us on? We won that negotiation last month, remember? You can liquidate up to 10% immediately if you want. That is $2 million in cash, available to you right now. I looked at the phone. The battery icon was blinking red, a sliver of life remaining. Noel, are you there? You are the majority shareholder. You just became one of the wealthiest women in tech under 35. You are free. Free. The word echoed in the freezing car. I looked at the text message from my mother, still visible in the notification banner. Don't expect help. A strange sensation washed over me. The tears were still streaming down my face, but the sobbing had stopped. My chest loosened, the desperate, clawing need for their validation, the pathetic hope that if I just gave them enough money or achieved enough success, they would finally love me. It evaporated. It didn't disappear slowly. It vanished instantly, incinerated by the heat of absolute power. I was sitting in a car worth less than $1,000, wearing a coat I had bought at a thrift store, stranded in a blizzard, and I was worth $20 million. David, I said, my voice steady, cold as the ice forming on my windshield. I need a favor. I need you to authorize a transfer to my emergency account, and I need you to call a car service, not a taxi. I want the most expensive private transport you can find. Get me a secure SUV. I want to go to the Mandarin Oriental. Done, David said. Consider it done. Congratulations, Noel. The phone died. The screen went black. I sat in the dark. The silence of the car, absolute. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red. My mascara was smeared. But my lips were curving upward. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a jagged, terrified, exhilarating expression. They had abandoned me in the snow because I was a burden. They had chosen a vlog backdrop over my doctorate. They thought they were discarding a broken-down daughter with a dead car. They had no idea they had just cut ties with a titan. I leaned back against the headrest, watching the snow bury the world outside. Let it snow. Let the car rust. Let them paint their walls and film their videos. I waited for my chariot, and for the first time in my life, I didn't care how long it took. I had all the time, and all the money, in the world. As the luxury SUV glided over the snow-covered highway, the heated leather seat seeping warmth into my frozen bones, my mind did not dwell on the $20 million sitting in my new brokerage account. Instead, it drifted back, pulled by the gravity of old wounds, to the ledger I kept in my head. It was a mental spreadsheet, black and red, that I had been updating for a decade. It was the accounting of my life as a human automated teller machine. The dynamic was established before I could even write my own name. In the Harrow household, roles were assigned at birth. Tiffany was the artist, the sensitive soul, the star that needed constant polishing. I was the rock. I was the practical one. I was the one who didn't need things. When Tiffany cried over a scraped knee, she got ice cream and a day off school. When I broke my arm falling off the swing set, I was told to stop making a scene and hold the ice pack myself. They told me I was independent. I realized later that independent was just their code word for neglected. The financial bleeding began the moment I landed my first real job as a junior developer at 22. I was making $70,000 a year. A fortune to a girl who had grown up wearing hand-me-downs. I remember calling them, bursting with pride, ready to take them out for a celebratory dinner. My father's reaction was not congratulations. It was a heavy sigh. He told me about his back pain, about how the insurance premiums had gone up, about how they were 2 months behind on the mortgage because they had bought Tiffany a high-end camera for her photography phase. "We are so proud of you, Noelle," my mother had said, her voice trembling just enough to trigger my guilt reflex. "It is such a relief to know one of you is safe. We were so worried about losing the house." I sent them a check for $3,000 the next day. I told myself it was a one-time thing. I told myself I was a good daughter. That check was the first drop of blood in the water. By the time I was 24, I was paying their mortgage directly. It was set up on autopay, $1,200 a month, vanishing from my account before I even saw it. But that was just the baseline subscription fee for their love. The hidden costs were where they really drained me. I remember the day Tiffany decided she was going to be an influencer. She was 20 years old and had dropped out of community college because the schedule interfered with her creative flow. She sat me down at the kitchen table, our parents nodding solemnly behind her, and explained that she couldn't show up to events in her 10-year-old hatchback. It didn't fit the brand. "Image is equity, Noelle," she had said. Using business terms she didn't understand to justify greed, she understood perfectly. If I want to get the luxury sponsorships, I have to look the part. I need the white convertible. The lease is only $600 a month. It is an investment. I said no. I actually said no that time. I told them I was saving for a down payment on a condo. My mother burst into tears. She wailed about how I was crushing my sister's dreams, about how I had always been jealous of Tiffany's spark, about how family supports family, no matter what. My father looked at me with cold disappointment and asked if I really wanted to be the reason my sister failed in life. I paid the lease for 3 years. The mental spreadsheet grew longer. Item: $4,000 for Tiffany's invisible braces because she couldn't possibly film videos with metal on her teeth. Item: $5,000 for my mother's spiritual healing retreat in Sedona, because dealing with my father's temper was blocking her chakras. Item: $8,000 lost when my father insisted he had a hot tip on a penny stock that was going to the moon. When it crashed to zero, he blamed the market manipulation, but it was my savings that vanished. Item: $2,000 for a purebred French bulldog for Tiffany, which she gave away 3 months later, because it didn't vibe with her new minimalist apartment aesthetic. While I funded their delusions of grandeur, I lived like a monk serving a penance for a crime I didn't commit. I lived in a basement apartment in Somerville with damp walls and a heater that rattled like a dying lung. My furniture was scavenged from the curb on moving day. I ate instant noodles 5 nights a week, adding a single boiled egg if I felt like splashing out. I wore my clothes until the fabric grew shiny and thin. I convinced myself this was normal. I told myself that this was what making it looked like. You sacrifice so your family can be happy. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was the contempt they showed for the source of it. I remember visiting them for Thanksgiving 2 years ago. I had taken the bus down because I couldn't afford to fix the radiator in my car. I walked in, shivering and exhausted, to find them drinking champagne. Tiffany was wearing a new designer jacket, I knew exactly how much that jacket cost because I had paid her credit card bill the week before. It was $1,200. "Oh, look who is here," Tiffany said, not bothering to get up from the sofa. She looked me up and down, curling her lip at my worn-out parka. "You look tired, Noelle, and gray. You really need to invest in some skincare. You look like you are 40. "I am tired because I worked 80 hours this week," I said, putting my bag down. "Work, work, work," she scoffed, rolling her eyes at her phone camera, likely live streaming to her 12 followers. "That is all you do. It is so boring. You are just a code monkey, right? Tapping away at a keyboard in a dark room. I could never do that. I need to live. I need inspiration." "My boring work paid for that jacket. Tiffany," I snapped. My mother immediately swooped in from the kitchen, a wooden spoon in her hand like a weapon. "Noelle, don't be vulgar. We do not talk about money at the dinner table. It is tacky. Tiffany is building a personal brand. You should be supportive, not jealous." Jealous. They always accused me of being jealous of the sister who had never worked a day in her life, while I was the one keeping the roof over their heads. Later that night, I saw a notification on Instagram. Tiffany had posted a photo of the three of them at a high-end steakhouse the night before. The caption read, "Family dinner, celebrating life and abundance, blessed." There was a platter of lobster and Wagyu beef on the table. The bill for that one meal was likely more than I spent on groceries for 2 months. They hadn't invited me. They hadn't even told me they were going. When I asked my father about it, he shrugged. "We knew you were working," he said. "You are always busy with your computer things. We didn't want to bother you." They didn't want to bother me with the dinner, but they certainly didn't mind bothering me with the check. The breaking point, the moment the cracks in my soul became structural fractures, happened 6 months ago. I had been pushing myself too hard at Etheria. We were in the final sprint before the beta launch, and I was running on 4 hours of sleep and caffeine tablets. I collapsed in the server room. 1 minute I was checking a line of code, and the next, I was waking up in an ambulance. The doctors called it severe exhaustion and malnutrition. My potassium levels were dangerously low. I was hooked up to an IV drip, lying in a hospital bed, feeling small and fragile. I called my parents. I was scared. I just wanted my mother to come and sit with me, maybe hold my hand, maybe tell me to rest. They arrived 4 hours later. They didn't bring flowers. They didn't bring a change of clothes for me. My mother walked in, looked at the monitors beeping around me, and sighed. "This is very inconvenient. Noelle," she said, taking a seat in the visitor chair and checking her watch. "We were supposed to go to the open house for Tiffany's potential studio space today." I collapsed. "Mom," I whispered. "The doctor said I might have heart palpitations." "Well, you need to take better care of yourself," she said dismissively. "You work too hard. It is obsessive." My father cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at a piece of paper in his hand. "Since we are here," he said, avoiding my eyes, "there is a bit of a situation. The electric company sent a final notice. They are going to cut the power to the house tomorrow if we don't pay the arrears. It is $400. I stared at him. I was lying in a hospital bed with a tube in my arm, and he was asking for utility money. My wallet is in the locker," I said weakly. "I can't get up." "That is fine," my mother said, perking up. She reached for her purse. "Just tell us the PIN for your debit card. Dad can run down to the ATM in the lobby and deposit the cash into our account right now." "You want my PIN?" I asked. "Don't look at me like that," she snapped. "Do you want us to sit in the dark? Do you want Tiffany to not be able to charge her ring lights? We are family. Stop being so selfish." I gave them the number. I was too weak to fight. I gave them the number. 1992, my birth year. My father left the room. He didn't come back to say goodbye. He just texted me later. "Got it. Thanks." My mother stayed for 10 more minutes, complaining about the smell of antiseptic in the room, and then left because the hospital parking was too expensive. I lay there alone, listening to the beep of the heart monitor, and I finally let myself see the truth I had been avoiding for a decade. My parents were not poor. They had pensions from their years as civil servants. They had Social Security. They had equity in the house that I had been paying for. They weren't destitute. They were simply redirecting every single cent of their own money into Tiffany's black hole of ambition and using me to subsidize their living expenses. They were betting the farm on the wrong horse, and they were using the workhorse to pay for the feed. Every dollar I sent them didn't go to survival. It went to freeing up their own cash so they could buy Tiffany a new lens, or a new wardrobe, or a trip to Los Angeles to network. I wasn't keeping them afloat. I was funding their venture capital project, and the project was my sister's ego. I closed my eyes in the warm SUV, the memory of that sterile hospital room burning behind my eyelids, the sheer audacity of asking a hospitalized daughter for her PIN number, the cruelty of eating lobster while your child eats instant noodles. "We are almost at the hotel, ma'am." The driver's voice broke through my reverie. I opened my eyes. We were entering the city. The lights of the skyscrapers were blurred by the snow, but they looked beautiful. They looked like diamonds scattered on black velvet. I pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app. I looked at the balance again. $20 million. Then, I opened my contacts. I scrolled down to Mom, Dad, and Tiffany. I didn't block them, not yet. Blocking them would be mercy. Blocking them would be silence. And I didn't want silence. I wanted them to scream. I wanted them to feel the panic of the tap running dry. I went to the Scheduled Transfers tab. Monthly mortgage support, $1,200, delete. Tiffany car lease, $600, delete. Parental stipend, $800, delete. Emergency fund top-up, $200, delete. I confirmed the cancellations one by one. Each tap of my finger felt like a gunshot. Then, I went to the settings on my credit card, the supplementary card I had given Tiffany for emergencies only, which she used for Starbucks and Zara. Deactivate card. Confirm. I took a deep breath. The air in the car smelled of expensive leather and conditioned air. It smelled like freedom. I wasn't their ATM anymore. The machine was out of order, and the technician had just quit. It has been exactly 1 week since the blizzard, and 7 days since I died. Or rather, since the version of Noel Harrow that my family knew ceased to exist. That pathetic, shivering creature who sat in a frozen sedan waiting for validation was gone. In her place sat a woman who was currently watching the sunset from the 45th floor of the Millennium Tower, a glass fortress in the heart of the financial district that pierced the clouds. My new apartment was a penthouse. It was a sterile, beautiful expanse of white marble and floor-to-ceiling windows. There were no drafty windows here. There was no smell of mildew or old cooking oil. The air was filtered, scented faintly of white tea and fig, and the temperature was kept at a precise 72 degrees. Security was paramount. To get to my front door, one had to pass through a doorman, a concierge, and a biometric scanner in the elevator that only responded to my retina. I had spent the first 2 days of my new life assembling a team. I was not going to make the mistake of handling my fortune alone. I hired Marcus, a ruthlessly efficient estate attorney who specialized in high-net-worth individuals who wanted to disappear. I also hired Elena, a personal assistant who possessed the organizational skills of a military general and the discretion of a confessional priest. Elena had handled the move. She had packed up my few belongings from the basement apartment, my laptop, my books, and the framed photo of my grandmother, and left the rest for the landlord to discard. I didn't want the old clothes. I didn't want the scratched furniture. I wanted a blank slate. Now, I stood in my kitchen, which was larger than my entire previous apartment. The countertops were made of quartzite, cool to the touch. On the counter sat my phone. It was the same cracked device I had used to call for help in the snow, but it was no longer a lifeline. It was a window into a burning building, and I was standing safely on the street, watching the flames. I had made a very specific decision regarding my communication. Marcus had advised me to change my number, to sever the link entirely. I refused. "I want to see it," I had told him, my voice devoid of emotion. I want to see them realize that the machine has stopped dispensing cash, but I do not want to hear it. So, I did not block them. Instead, I went into the settings of my phone and silenced all notifications from Mom, Dad, and Tiffany. Their calls would not ring. Their texts would not vibrate. They would simply accumulate in the notification center, a silent pile of digital desperation that I could examine at my leisure, like a scientist observing bacteria in a petri dish. The real act of war, however, was not the silence. It was the cancellation of the autopay. For 10 years, my bank account had been synchronized with theirs. On the first of every month, money moved invisibly from my labor to their leisure. It was a rhythmic extraction that they had come to view as a natural law, like gravity or the rising sun. Yesterday was the first of the month. I was in a board meeting at Etheria when the first tremor hit. We were discussing the post-IPO expansion strategy. I was seated at the head of the table, not as a shadow consultant, but as the chief technology officer. I was wearing a suit that cost $4,000, tailored to fit me perfectly. When I spoke, 30 engineers and executives fell silent and took notes. My phone, lying face up on the mahogany table, lit up silently. It was a text from my father. I glanced at it, finished my sentence about scalable server architecture, and then casually tapped the screen to read the preview. "Hey, Noel, the bank just sent a notification. The mortgage transfer didn't go through. Probably a glitch on your end. Check it immediately. We are close to the late fee date." I felt a small, cold smile tug at the corner of my mouth. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask where I was. He assumed it was a glitch. He assumed that the universe had made a clerical error, because in his world, my purpose was to pay his bills. I slid the phone away and turned back to the board of directors. "Let us proceed to the next slide," I said, my voice steady. By the afternoon of the first day, the texts had shifted from informative to annoyed. "Noel, did you get my text? The electric bill is also unpaid. What is going on? Pick up the phone. Mom is getting worried about the credit score." I went out for a celebratory dinner with David and the executive team that night. We went to a Michelin-starred restaurant where the menu didn't have prices. I ate truffle risotto and drank vintage Pinot Noir. I didn't check my phone once. Then came the 5th day. Today. The 5th of the month was Tiffany's day. It was the day the billing cycle on the supplementary credit card reset. It was the day she usually went on her content creation runs, which was her euphemism for buying designer clothes she couldn't afford to impress strangers on the internet. I was sitting in my penthouse, the city lights twinkling below me like a spilled jewelry box. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon, a bottle that cost $600. I swirled the dark red liquid, watching it coat the glass, and unlocked my phone. The floodgates had opened. There were 47 missed calls, 22 from my mother, 15 from my father, 10 from Tiffany, and then there were the texts. I scrolled through them, reading them chronologically, tracing the arc of their panic. It started at 2 in the afternoon. Tiffany: "Hey sis, at the mall. Buying some props for the new video. Need you to approve a transaction real quick. The bank is acting weird." Tiffany: 10 minutes later. "Noel, pick up. The cashier is waiting." Tiffany: 20 minutes later. "Seriously? The card just declined. Declined. Do you know how embarrassing this is? There are people in line behind me." Tiffany: 30 minutes later. "I had to leave the store. The manager looked at me like I was a thief. Fix this now." Then, the parents joined in. "Mom, Tiffany is crying in the car. She says you cut off the card. Stop playing games. Noel, this is cruel. She needs those things for her career." Dad: "I tried to call the bank pretending to be you, but they asked for a security phrase you changed. What is the meaning of this? The mortgage is still unpaid. Do you want us to lose the house?" I took a sip of wine. The liquid was complex. With notes of dark cherry and oak, it tasted like victory. They were not worried about me. They were not worried that I had vanished. They had gone to my old apartment, found it empty, and their primary concern was not that their daughter was missing, but that the payment source had relocated without leaving a forwarding address. A new text bubbled to the top of the screen. It was from Tiffany again. "You are such a jealous witch. You think because you have a little job you can control us? I am going to tell everyone what you are doing. Leaving your family to starve. You better fix this or I will make you regret it. I am at the Gucci store counter and I look like a fool." I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound that echoed in the empty penthouse. I am at the Gucci store. She wasn't starving. She wasn't in danger. She was at a luxury boutique, trying to buy a handbag that cost more than my first car, using money that I had earned by destroying my health. And she felt victimized because the plastic card in her hand had stopped working. I typed out a reply. My thumb hovered over the send button. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to list every sacrifice, every skipped meal, every humiliation. But then I deleted it. Responding would be engagement. Responding would give them what they wanted. Access. They wanted a fight because a fight meant I was still in the game. They wanted to negotiate. They wanted to guilt-trip me until I opened the wallet again. Silence was the only language they couldn't argue with. You cannot gaslight a ghost. I put the phone down on the marble table. It buzzed again, vibrating against the stone like an angry hornet. "Dad. Noelle, answer me. The bank says the transfer was canceled by the user. Why did you cancel it?" I walked away from the phone. I walked to the window and pressed my hand against the cold glass. Down there, 45 stories below, the city was moving. People were rushing to catch trains, worrying about bills, fighting with their loved ones. Up here, it was quiet. For the first time in 32 years, I took a breath that didn't catch in my throat. My chest expanded fully. I wasn't holding up the sky anymore. I had let it fall. And to my surprise, the world hadn't ended. The only thing that had collapsed was the parasitic structure that had been built on my back. I looked at the reflection of the room in the glass. I saw a woman in a silk robe, holding a glass of wine, standing in a fortress of her own making. I looked tired. Yes, the dark circles were still there, faint remnants of the hospital stay. But my eyes were clear. Let them call. Let them text. Let them panic. Let them find out what happens when the ATM displays an out-of-order sign permanently. I turned my back on the view and walked toward the master bedroom. I had an early meeting tomorrow. We were discussing the integration of a new artificial intelligence module. It was complex, challenging work, the kind of work I loved, the kind of work that paid me millions because I was brilliant, not because I was obedient. As I walked down the hallway, the phone buzzed one last time in the distance, a final, futile plea from the darkness I had left behind. "Noelle, please, we are family." I didn't turn around. I didn't even pause. I turned off the lights in the living room, leaving the phone buzzing in the dark, and closed the door to my bedroom. I slept soundly, without a single dream, for the first time in my life. 2 weeks is a long time in politics, but it is an eternity for a parasite that has been severed from its host. I was not there to witness the implosion of the Harrow household firsthand. I was sitting in my climate-controlled office at Etheria, watching the stock ticker for our company climb another 3%. However, I had something better than a front-row seat. I had Aunt Helen. Aunt Helen was my mother's older sister, a woman who had been black-sheeped by the family 20 years ago for the cardinal sin of marrying a plumber instead of a doctor. She was the only person in my bloodline who sent me birthday cards without cash requests inside. When I went silent, she was the only one who didn't demand money. She just sent a text that said, "Good for you, kid. Give 'em hell." And now, she was my spy. Through her gleeful daily phone calls and screenshots, I was able to reconstruct the comedy of errors that was my family's life over the last 14 days. It was a dark comedy, the kind where you laugh to keep from screaming at the sheer audacity of the characters. It began, as all tragedies do, with denial. For the first week, my parents assumed I was throwing a tantrum. They told Aunt Helen that I was just menstruating or having a moody spell, and that I would come crawling back with an apology check by the weekend. But when the second week rolled around and the fridge was empty, panic set in. They realized they had no savings, not a dime. They had spent every dollar of their pensions and my contributions on Tiffany's career. Desperation breeds stupidity, and my parents were very desperate. According to Helen, on Tuesday morning, they drove to my old apartment in Somerville. They didn't go to check on my well-being. They went because they needed to physically bully me into logging into the banking app. I can picture the scene perfectly. My mother, wearing her faux fur coat to look intimidation ready, and my father, practicing his disappointed patriarch face. They marched up to the peeling green door of the basement unit and banged on it. "Noelle, open up! We know you are in there!" my mother screamed, likely alerting the entire neighborhood. But the door didn't open. Instead, Mr. Henderson, my former landlord, walked out of his unit on the first floor. Mr. Henderson was a man who communicated primarily in grunts and cigar smoke. He essentially hated everyone, but he had a special loathing for my parents, who used to park in his driveway without asking. "She is gone," Mr. Henderson told them, apparently taking great pleasure in the revelation. "What do you mean, gone?" my father demanded. "She lives here. Her lease isn't up." "She broke it," Henderson replied. "Paid the penalty in cash. Cleared out last week. Even hired a cleaning crew. The place is cleaner than when she moved in. Left the keys in the drop box." "Where did she go?" my mother shrieked, clutching her pearls. "We are her parents. You have to tell us." "Don't know, don't care," Henderson said, before slamming his door in their faces. They stood there in the cold, staring at the empty driveway where my rusted sedan used to be. They didn't realize I had escaped to a penthouse. In their narrow minds, they probably thought I was homeless. And yet, their first call to Aunt Helen wasn't, "Is Noelle safe?" It was, "How are we going to pay the water bill?" The panic then spread to Tiffany. My sister's reality check came in the form of a latte. Tiffany believed that she was a celebrity. In her mind, the world owed her things simply for existing. When I cut off the supplementary credit card, she assumed it was a technical error. 3 days ago, she walked into her favorite artisanal coffee shop, the one where a coffee costs $8. She ordered her usual oat milk vanilla bean extra foam latte and a vegan croissant. She tapped the card. Beep, declined. She tapped it again. Beep, declined. According to the barista, who happened to be the cousin of Aunt Helen's neighbor, the gossip network in this town is faster than fiber optics, Tiffany tried to use her charm. "Do you know who I am?" she asked the teenager behind the counter. "I will tag you in my story. It is a great exposure." "It is $12.50, the teenager replied, unimpressed. Tiffany didn't have cash. She didn't have another card. She had to leave the croissant on the counter and walk out. For Tiffany, this was not just an inconvenience. It was a trauma. It was a violation of her perceived human rights. That afternoon, Aunt Helen sent me a screenshot of Tiffany's private Instagram story, visible only to close friends. It was a photo of her selling 3 of her vintage designer handbags to a secondhand store. The caption read, "Cleaning out the closet. Minimalist vibes only. DM for prices." The truth was darker. Helen told me Tiffany stood at the counter of the pawn shop for 40 minutes, arguing with the appraiser who told her that her investment pieces were actually knockoffs or heavily damaged. She walked out with $200 for bags that had cost me $3,000 to buy her. She used the money to buy data for her phone because I had cut the family plan. And she couldn't survive without TikTok. When private bullying failed, they took the war public. My mother, realizing she could not extort me in person, decided to assassinate my character online. She went to Facebook, the weapon of choice for passive-aggressive mothers everywhere. I was in a meeting with our legal compliance team when my phone buzzed with a screenshot from Helen. My mother had posted a photo of me from my high school graduation, a photo where I looked awkward and young. The caption was a masterpiece of fiction. "Heartbroken today," she wrote. "You sacrifice everything for your children. You go hungry so they can eat. You work your fingers to the bone so they can go to college. And how do they repay you? By abandoning you in your old age. Our daughter Noelle, who we supported through everything, has decided she is too successful for her family now. She has cut us off without a word. No call, no explanation, just cold silence. We are struggling to keep the heat on, and she is nowhere to be found. Please pray for our family during this betrayal. It was a viral hit in our small hometown. The comments section was a cesspool. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in 10 years were chiming in. So ungrateful, I always knew she was cold. How can a child do that to her parents? Shame on her. Money changes people, so sad. My cousin Brenda, who had once stolen money from my purse at a family reunion, sent me a direct message. You should be ashamed of yourself. Noelle, Auntie is crying her eyes out. Send the money right now or I will come find you. I read the message and took a sip of my sparkling water. I didn't feel angry. I felt amusement. They were trying to shame me using a narrative that only worked if I cared about their opinion. But I didn't care. I was the CEO of my own life now, and their reviews were irrelevant. But the height of the comedy, the absolute peak of their incompetence, happened yesterday. My father, trying to be the man of action, decided he would go to my workplace and demand my paycheck be garnished. He put on his only suit, which was 2 sizes too big, and drove into the city. However, there was a flaw in his plan. He didn't know where I worked. For the last 5 years, whenever they asked about my job, I told them I was doing computer stuff or consulting. They never asked for details. They never asked the name of the company. In their minds, I was still the lowly intern I had been at 22. So, my father drove to the offices of Tech Giant Solutions, a mid-level IT firm where I had done an internship 8 years ago. Aunt Helen got the details from her son, who works security in that same building. Apparently, my father marched up to the front desk and demanded to see Noelle Harrow from the computer department. The receptionist, a young woman who was likely in middle school when I worked there, looked him up in the directory. I am sorry, sir, she said. We have no employees by that name. Don't lie to me, my father shouted, causing the security guards to step forward. She has worked here for 8 years. She is hiding from me. Tell her to come down here. I am her father. Sir, the receptionist said, terrified. The last record we have of a Noelle Harrow is an intern who left in the year 2018. She hasn't worked here in almost a decade. My father stood there, red-faced and confused. But she sends money every month. Where does she get it? I don't know, sir, but she doesn't get it here. You need to leave. He was escorted out of the building by security. He had driven 2 hours, paid $40 for parking, and humiliated himself, only to realize he knew absolutely nothing about the daughter he claimed to love. He didn't know my title. He didn't know my company. He didn't know that while he thought I was a code monkey at a help desk, I was building the architecture of the future a few blocks away in a skyscraper he couldn't even enter without a security clearance. When he got home, the family held a war council. Aunt Helen listened in through the thin walls of her garden. She lived next door to them, a fact I was now incredibly grateful for. They were in the kitchen. The power was still on, but only because the disconnection notice gave them a 30-day grace period. She is clearly doing something illegal, Tiffany argued, her voice shrill. That is why she moved. That is why she hid her job. She is probably dealing drugs or laundering money. We should call the police. And say what? My father snapped. That our daughter is a criminal because she stopped paying our bills? The police will laugh at us. We need leverage, my mother said. We need to force her out of hiding. I have an idea, Tiffany said, and even through Helen's retelling, I could hear the malicious grin in her voice. Social media is powerful, right? Mom's Facebook post got some likes, but it is for old people. We need to go viral. We need to go nuclear. What do you mean? I will make a TikTok series, Tiffany announced. The truth about my sister. I will cry. I will say she stole my inheritance. I will say she abused us. I will make her look like a monster. The internet loves a villain. If we make enough noise, her boss will see it. Whoever she works for will have to fire her to save face. She will have to come back to us to beg for us to stop. Is that true? My father asked weakly. Does it matter? Tiffany replied. We need $50,000 by next week, or they will take the car. Do you want to walk to the bus stop? Dad? There was silence, and then my mother spoke. Do it. Make her pay. Aunt Helen texted me the summary of this conversation at 10 o'clock last night. They are coming for you, honey, she wrote. Tiffany is setting up her ring light right now. Watch your back. I sat in my penthouse, looking at the message. I wasn't scared. I wasn't worried about Etheria. David and the board knew exactly who I was. I was smiling. They thought they were the hunters. They thought social media was their weapon. They had no idea that by stepping into the spotlight, they were walking directly into my trap. Tiffany was about to broadcast her lies to the world, and in doing so, she was going to give me the one thing I needed to destroy them completely: admissible evidence of defamation. I picked up my phone and typed a reply to Aunt Helen. Let them film, Auntie. Make sure you watch it. You are going to want to see the season finale. I put the phone down and picked up a file my lawyer had sent over that morning. It was a thick dossier titled Forensic Accounting, Harrow Family Expenditures, 2016 to 2026. Panic looks ugly on them. I thought, but justice? Justice was going to look beautiful. The video dropped on a Tuesday evening, specifically chosen to maximize engagement during the post-dinner scrolling hour. I was in my home office, reviewing code for a patch update, when Elena, my assistant, walked in. Her face was pale, the kind of pale that usually signifies a market crash or a legal summons. She didn't say a word. She just placed her tablet on my desk and pressed play. On the screen, Tiffany was sitting on the floor of her apartment, knees pulled to her chest, wearing an oversized gray hoodie that swallowed her frame. She looked small, fragile, and devastated. Her makeup was artfully smeared, just enough to suggest hours of weeping, but not enough to ruin her contouring. The lighting was soft, tragic, and perfect. Hi, guys, Tiffany whispered, her voice cracking. She wiped a tear from her cheek. I didn't want to make this video. I really didn't. I believe in keeping family matters private, but I don't know what else to do. We are desperate. She took a shaky breath, looking directly into the camera lens. My sister, Noelle, she has disappeared. But before she left, she did something unforgivable. My parents, they are sick. My dad has a heart condition, and my mom needs surgery. I watched, stone-faced. My father's heart was fine, aside from the cholesterol clogging it from too much red meat, and my mother's surgery was likely a cosmetic lift she had been researching. We trusted her, Tiffany continued, a fresh tear tracking down her nose. We gave her control of the family finances because she said she wanted to help invest our savings. It was everything my parents had, their pension, their life savings. My grandmother's inheritance was meant for me. I leaned back in my chair. There was no inheritance. Grandmother died with nothing but a collection of ceramic cats and debt. She took it all, Tiffany sobbed, burying her face in her hands. She cleared out the accounts and ran off with some guy she met online. We are about to lose the house. We can't even afford groceries. I am selling my clothes just to buy my dad his medication. How can someone be so evil? How can you leave your own parents to die? The video ended with a black screen and a text overlay. #Justice for the Harrows. #Find Noelle. It was a masterclass in manipulation. It was a lie so audacious, so completely divorced from reality, that it was almost impressive. It has 200,000 views, Elena said quietly, and it has been up for 3 hours. It is trending locally. I picked up the tablet and scrolled to the comments. It was a digital lynch mob. Find this witch and make her pay, wrote user TruthSeeker99. This is elder abuse. Someone called the FBI, wrote Mama Bear for Life. I went to high school with Noelle, wrote someone I didn't even recognize. She was always weird, super arrogant, not surprised she turned out to be a sociopath. My old social media accounts, which I hadn't used in years, were being flooded. My LinkedIn profile, which I'd forgotten to set to private, was getting messages calling me a thief and a monster. They were trying to dox me. digging for my address, my phone number, anything they could use to hurt me. The next morning, the local tabloid, the City Chronicle, ran the story on page 4. My parents had given an exclusive interview. "Daughter of the Year turns devil," the headline screamed in bold, sans serif font. In the article, my mother painted a portrait of a troubled, unstable child whom they had tried so hard to save. "Noelle has always struggled with her mental health," my mother was quoted as saying. "We paid for therapy. We paid for her education. We supported her when she couldn't hold down a job. We thought she was getting better. But she must have had a psychotic break. We don't care about the money. We just want our daughter to get help before she hurts herself or someone else." I put the newspaper down on my glass coffee table. "They paid for my education," I said to the empty room, my voice flat. "I am still paying off the student loans for my undergraduate degree because I used my salary to pay their mortgage instead of my debt." My phone rang. It was Julian, the CEO of Etheria. Julian was a visionary, a man who saw the future in lines of code. But right now, he was seeing a PR nightmare. "Noelle," he said, skipping the pleasantries, "our investor relations team is getting emails. Someone linked your name to Etheria on a forum. They are saying our CTO is a fugitive who embezzled family funds. I know it is garbage. I know you, but the stock is volatile. We just IPO'd. Perception is reality in this market. If this blows up, the board is going to panic." "Julian," I said, cutting him off, "do not issue a statement. Do not deny it. Do not engage." "We have to do something," he insisted. "We can sue for libel. We can shut this down. If we sue now, it becomes a he said, she said story," I explained, my voice calm and icy. "It drags on for months. The public loves a scandal. They will think I am using corporate money to silence a poor, grieving family. We need to let them overplay their hand." "What are you planning, Noelle?" Julian asked. "The higher they climb, the harder they fall," I said. "Let them build the stage. Let them gather the audience. Let them think they have won. When the truth comes out, I want it to be definitive. I want it to be a spectacle. Trust me, Julian. By Friday night, the stock will be higher than ever." He hesitated, then sighed. "Friday night, the gala, you better be right. Noelle." "I am always right," I said. "That is why you pay me." I hung up and turned to Marcus, my lawyer, who was sitting on my sofa with a stack of files that was 6 inches thick. "Is it ready?" I asked. Marcus nodded. He was a man of few words and sharp suits. "We have everything. I subpoenaed the bank records going back 10 years. We have the transfer history. Every single cent is documented. I have the receipts for the car lease, the tuition payments, the mortgage payments, the credit card bills. I also have the affidavit from the hospital regarding your admission for malnutrition 6 months ago." "And the text?" I asked. "Authenticated and blown up for high-resolution display," Marcus said. "We also found something else, the loan shark." I raised an eyebrow. "Tiffany didn't just spend the money on clothes," Marcus said, opening a folder. "She borrowed $50,000 from a predatory lender 6 months ago to fund a luxury retreat business that never launched. She defaulted last week. Your parents co-signed the loan. They put the house up as collateral. That is why they are desperate. They aren't hungry. Noelle, they are about to be homeless because of a gambling debt, essentially." I took the file and looked at the documents. My parents' signatures were there. Shaky but legible. They had bet the house I paid for, on Tiffany's whim. "Excellent," I said. "Keep it sealed. We use it at parties." The pressure from the outside world was mounting. My silence was being interpreted as guilt. The internet sleuths were getting closer to finding my old email address. Then the ultimatum came. It was Thursday night. The gala was 24 hours away. My phone buzzed with a text from Tiffany. She had evidently decided that enough public shaming had occurred to soften me up for the kill. "Look, Noelle," the text read, "this is getting out of hand. Mom is crying nonstop. The press is calling us every hour. We can make this all go away. We can delete the video. We can tell the reporter it was a misunderstanding, but we need help. We need $50,000, cash or wire, today." I didn't reply immediately. I let her stew. 10 minutes later, another text. "If you don't send the money, I am going to find out where you work. I have a lead. I will come to your office with a megaphone. I will scream until your boss comes out. Do you want to lose your job? Do you want your coworkers to know you are a thief? $50,000 is nothing to you. Send it, and we disappear." She was threatening to burn down a castle she didn't even know I owned. I looked at the number, $50,000, the exact amount of the loan shark debt. They weren't asking for help. They were asking me to clean up their mess one last time. I sat there, feeling the weight of the last 30 years. I felt the ghost of the girl who used to apologize for existing. I felt the phantom pain of hunger in my stomach from the nights I skipped dinner to save money. I typed my response. It was the first time I had communicated with them in weeks. "I will not send a wire." I hit send. The 3 dots of her typing appeared instantly. "Then you are dead to us. Get ready for hell." I typed again. "I want to settle this face to face. I am tired of hiding. You want money? Come and get it. My company is hosting a celebration tomorrow night. The Etheria Systems Gala. Grand Ballroom. The Ritz-Carlton. 7 o'clock. I have a gift for you. It will solve all your problems." I waited. "Will you bring the check?" she asked. "I will bring everything you deserve," I replied. "Fine," Tiffany texted back. "We will be there, and don't try any tricks. I will be live streaming." "Please do," I whispered to the empty room. "I am counting on it." I could practically see the celebration happening in their house. They would be high-fiving. They would be thinking that their pressure campaign had worked, that I had cracked under the weight of public shame. They thought they had bullied the ATM back into service. I spent the rest of the night coordinating with the event production team. I spoke to the lighting director. I spoke to the security chief. I sent the specific files to the audiovisual technician. "When I give the signal," I told him, "you cut the company reel and you play my file. No audio at first, just the visuals." "Understood, Ms. Harrow," he said. I went to my closet and pulled out the dress I had bought for the occasion. It was midnight blue, sleek, and sharp as a knife. It wasn't the dress of a victim. It was the dress of an executioner. Friday evening arrived with a biting cold wind, but inside the Ritz-Carlton, the air was warm and smelled of expensive perfume and anticipation. The ballroom was filled up with the elite of the tech world, venture capitalists, journalists, competitors, and politicians. At 6:55, I received a text from the head of security. "Guests matching the description have arrived at the perimeter. They are conspicuous." I looked at the security feed on my tablet. There they were. My mother was wearing a gown that was too tight and covered in sequins, looking like a disco ball that had seen better days. My father was in a tuxedo that I recognized. He had rented it for a cousin's wedding 5 years ago. And Tiffany was wearing a white dress that looked like a bridal gown cut short, carrying her phone on a gimbal stabilizer like a scepter. They walked with their chins up. They walked with the arrogance of conquerors, coming to collect tribute from a defeated subject. They pushed past the other guests, ignoring the looks of confusion from the billionaires and innovators around them. They didn't see the security guards stepping aside to let them in. Not because they were intimidated, but because they had been ordered to clear the path. They didn't see the trap. They only saw the gold. I stood in the shadows of the stage wing, watching them enter. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I felt a profound, deadly calm. "Showtime," I whispered. I signaled the stage manager. "Let them in," I said into my headset. "Give them the best seats in the house. Front row, center. I want them to have a perfect view." The stage was set. The players were in position. The audience was waiting. And the script? The script was going to be a tragedy for them. But for me, it was going to be the greatest liberation story ever told. The morning of the gala did not begin with panic. It began with a summons to the High Point estate, the sprawling, ivy-covered residence of Arthur Sterling. Arthur was more than just a member of the Etheria Systems Board of Directors. He was a titan of the venture capital world, a man whose handshake was worth more than most legal contracts. He was 72 years old, with silver hair combed back with military precision and eyes that were the color of polished steel. But to me, he was the only link I had left to a past that wasn't poisoned. He had been the best friend of my grandfather, Silas, the only member of the Harrow bloodline who had ever looked at me with anything other than calculation. I sat in his library, a room that smelled of old leather, pipe tobacco, and history. A fire was crackling in the hearth, casting a warm orange glow against the dark mahogany walls. It was a stark contrast to the sterile, cold luxury of my penthouse. This room felt like a sanctuary. Arthur sat across from me in a wingback chair, pouring tea from a silver pot. His hands were steady. "You look like him." "You know," Arthur said softly, sliding a porcelain cup toward me. "Silas, you have his quiet intensity. He was the only one in your family who had a spine. It is a tragedy that he passed before he could see you become this. He would have been ashamed of what is happening today," I said, my voice low. "The newspapers, the videos, the lies." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the dossier my lawyer, Marcus, had compiled, along with a tablet queued up with Tiffany's viral TikTok series. I placed them on the coffee table between us. "I wanted you to see this before tonight. Arthur," I said, "the board trusts you. If things go sideways at the gala, if my family causes a scene that damages the stock price, I need you to know the truth. I need you to know that I am not the monster they are painting me to be." Arthur didn't touch the tablet. He didn't open the file. He just looked at me, his expression softening into a look of profound sorrow mixed with a hardening resolve. "Noelle," he said, his voice deep and resonant, "I do not need to read your file to know who you are. I watched you grow up from a distance. I saw how you studied while your sister played. I saw how you wore the same winter coat for 4 years while your parents drove a new sedan. Silas told me everything before he died. He told me he was worried they would eat you alive." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I did not just sit by and watch. Noelle, when you told me you were going to confront them, when you told me about the blackmail, I made some calls. I have resources that go beyond standard background checks." Arthur opened a drawer in the small table beside him and pulled out a single, thick manila envelope. He placed it on top of my dossier. "You have your evidence of their spending," Arthur said. "But this is the evidence of their desperation. This is why they are hunting you with such ferocity. It is not just greed, Noelle. It is terror." I opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, legal documents, and a transcript of a wiretap. "What is this?" I asked, scanning the first page. "Tiffany did not just borrow money for a lifestyle business," Arthur explained, his tone clinical but laced with disgust. "She got involved in a multi-level marketing scheme called the Gilded Circle. It is a classic Ponzi scheme disguised as a luxury investment group. They promise 300% returns if you recruit 5 people. Tiffany, believing she is an influencer with power, bought into the highest tier. I read the document. The buy-in fee was $50,000. "She didn't have the money," I whispered. "No," Arthur said, "and neither did your parents. But Tiffany was convinced she would be a millionaire in a month. So she went to a private lender, not a bank, a man named Mr. Varga. He operates out of a back room in the warehouse district. He lends money at 20% interest, compounded weekly, to people who cannot get approved by legitimate institutions." My stomach turned. I knew the type. These were not people who sent polite letters when you missed a payment. "Look at the 3rd page," Arthur instructed. I turned the page. It was a copy of a collateral agreement. At the bottom, there were 3 signatures: Tiffany Harrow, Robert Harrow, Susan Harrow. "They co-signed," I said, feeling the blood drain from my face. "They didn't just co-sign," Arthur corrected me. "They put up the deed to their house as collateral, the house you paid for, the house that is the only roof over their heads. They signed a document stating that if the $50,000 plus interest is not repaid in full by tomorrow, Mr. Varga takes possession of the property immediately. I stared at the signatures. They had gambled their entire existence on Tiffany's delusion. They had bet my hard work, my years of sacrifice, on a pyramid scheme. The deadline is tomorrow? I asked. Technically, it is midnight tonight, Arthur said. That is why they are frantic. That is why they are demanding $50,000. They are not trying to buy handbags. Noelle, they are trying to stop an eviction and keep their kneecaps intact. They are cornered animals. I sat back, the revelations settling over me. It changed everything. It transformed their malice into a pathetic, frantic flailing. They weren't powerful villains. They were fools dancing on the edge of a volcano. This is the weapon, I said. This proves everything. It proves I didn't steal their money. It proves they squandered everything. It does, Arthur said. But there is more. I took the liberty of contacting Mr. Varga's organization. I bought the debt. I froze. You what? Arthur smiled. A thin, shark-like smile that reminded me why he was a billionaire. I paid off the principal this morning. Mr. Varga was happy to take the cash and wash his hands of the harrows. I now hold the note. I hold the deed to your parents' house, which means, Noelle, that you hold the deed. He slid the paper across the table toward me. You are their creditor now, Arthur said. They do not know this. They think they are coming to the gala to bully a daughter. They do not realize they are walking into the courtroom of their landlord. I looked at the older man, tears stinging my eyes. For 30 years, I had been the one who had to fix everything. I was the one who had to be the adult. My father had never protected me. He had only used me. And here was Arthur, a man who owed me nothing, handing me the sword I needed to cut the final cord. Why? I asked, my voice trembling. Why did you do this for me? Arthur reached out and placed his hand over mine. His skin was dry and warm. Because Silas would have wanted someone to stand between you and the wolves, he said gently, and because you are remarkable. Noelle, you built Etheria. You changed the world with your code. You deserve to walk into that ballroom tonight with your head high, knowing that you are untouchable. You are not alone anymore. I took a deep breath, feeling a knot in my chest loosen. It was a sensation I had never felt before. It was the feeling of being safe, the feeling of being championed. Thank you, Arthur, I said. Do not thank me yet, he said, standing up and buttoning his tweed jacket. We have a show to put on. I have spoken to the production team. Is the timeline on the screen ready? It is, I confirmed, standing up with him. Every transaction, every text message, every lie. Good, Arthur said. I will introduce you. I will take the stage first. I will be the shield, and you will be the sword. When they arrive, they will expect a frightened girl ready to write a check. Instead, they will find a CEO and a chairman ready to foreclose on their lies. We walked over to the large desk where the blueprints of the Ritz-Carlton ballroom were laid out. The audiovisual team knows the cue, I said, pointing to the diagram. When Tiffany starts her live stream, we cut the house lights. We spotlight them. We put the feed from her phone directly onto the main IMAX screen behind the stage. We let her broadcast her own destruction. And the microphone? Arthur asked. I have a lapel mic, I said, and we have placed a boom mic right above the VIP table where they will be sitting. Everything they say, every whisper, every threat will be amplified to the entire room. Arthur nodded approvingly. Brutal, efficient, necessary. They wanted a public spectacle, I said, my voice hardening. I am just giving them what they asked for. One last thing, Arthur said, looking me in the eye. When this is over, when they are escorted out, do not look back. Do not let them see you cry. Do not let them see you waver. You look at me. You look at David. You look at the future. I won't look back, I promised. I am done looking back. Arthur checked his pocket watch. It was an antique gold piece, ticking rhythmically in the quiet room. It is time to get ready. Noelle, he said. The car is waiting. Tonight, We do not just celebrate an initial public offering, we celebrate emancipation. I gathered the files, the evidence, and the deed to the house. I held them against my chest like armor. As I walked out of the library into the crisp afternoon air, I felt a shift in the universe. The victim was gone. The ATM was broken. The executioner was on her way to the ball. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was not merely a room. It was a cathedral dedicated to the worship of the capital. The ceiling soared 30 feet high, draped in chandeliers that dripped crystal tears, refracting the light into a million tiny rainbows that danced across the faces of the most powerful people in technology. The air was cool, scented with fresh white lilies and the expensive metallic tang of chilled vintage champagne. I stood near the center of the room, a glass of sparkling water in my hand, wearing the midnight blue gown that felt less like clothing and more like a suit of armor. The fabric hugged my silhouette, stark and simple against the sea of sequins and ruffles around me. Tonight was the Etheria Systems IPO gala. It was supposed to be the crowning achievement of my career, and it was, but not because of the stock price. "You look like a statue," Julian said, appearing at my elbow. "A very expensive, very dangerous statue." "I am focusing," I replied, my eyes scanning the entrance. The guests of honor should be arriving any minute. "Are you sure about this, Noel?" Julian asked, his voice low so the nearby reporter from the Wall Street Journal wouldn't hear. "Security can stop them at the door. We can do this quietly. We can have them escorted to a private room." "No," I said, taking a sip of water. "They wanted a show. They wanted the world to see how they have been wronged. If I hide them in a back room, I validate their narrative that I'm ashamed. I need them here. Julian, I need them in the light." Around us, the room buzzed with the hum of success. Waiters in white gloves moved like ghosts, carrying trays of caviar and foie gras. To my left, the founder of a major search engine was laughing with the Minister of Trade. To my right, a group of venture capitalists were discussing the closing price of Etheria stock, their voices full of reverence for the wealth we had just created. Then, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't a noise at first. It was a ripple in the crowd near the main double doors. Heads turned, conversations stalled, the polished, polite hum of the gala was punctured by a sound that did not belong there. It was the sound of a voice raised in shrill, performative indignation. "We are on the list. Do not touch me. I am the mother of the CTO." I didn't flinch. I watched as the heavy mahogany doors swung open. The security team, following my precise instructions, stepped aside with theatrical politeness, and in walked the Harrow family. If the ballroom was a painting of refined elegance, my family was a neon graffiti tag sprayed across the canvas. My mother was wearing a dress that was a violent shade of electric blue, covered in sequins that caught the light and threw it back aggressively. It was too tight, too short, and she had paired it with a fake fur stole that looked like it had been skinned from a radioactive badger. She was clutching a gold clutch bag that I knew for a fact was a counterfeit she had bought at a flea market. My father was trailing behind her, looking red-faced and bellicose. His tuxedo was ill-fitting, the sleeves too long, swallowing his hands. He was walking with his chest puffed out, trying to project an air of authority that he had never actually possessed. And then there was Tiffany. My sister was dressed for a pageant. She wore a white, floor-length gown with a tulle skirt so wide it brushed against the legs of the guests she passed. But the most grotesque accessory was not her dress. It was the smartphone mounted on a gimbal stabilizer that she held out in front of her like a holy relic. The ring light attached to it cast a harsh, artificial halo around her face. She was live streaming. "Okay, guys." Tiffany's voice carried over the hush of the room. We are at the Ritz. Look at this place. This is where she is hiding. This is where she is drinking champagne while we starve." She panned the camera around, shoving the lens into the faces of bewildered guests. A famous tech journalist recoiled as Tiffany thrust the phone at him. "Excuse me," Tiffany said loudly to a waiter. "Where's the bar? I need a drink. I am so stressed." The crowd parted. It was a reaction of pure instinct, The wealthy and the powerful know how to handle market crashes and lawsuits, but they do not know how to handle public scenes. They retreated, creating a wide, open path that led directly from the door to where I was standing. I didn't move. I stood next to Arthur Sterling and Julian, anchoring myself to the floor. "There she is!" my mother shrieked. It was a sound that could shatter glass. She pointed a manicured finger at me. "Noelle!" The entire room froze. The string quartet in the corner stopped playing mid-measure. My mother began her run. It was a trot, really, hampered by her heels. But she moved with the momentum of a woman who had rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror. She rushed toward me, her face crumpling into a mask of exaggerated agony. "Oh, Noelle!" she wailed, throwing her arms out. "My baby, how could you?" She stopped 5 feet away from me, ensuring she was in the perfect center of the room, under the main chandelier. She didn't hug me. She fell to her knees. It was a performance worthy of an award. She collapsed onto the plush carpet, clutching her chest. "We have been so worried," she sobbed, her voice booming in the silent hall. "We thought you were dead. We went to your apartment and it was empty. Why did you leave us? Why did you cut us off? Your father, his heart is breaking." Tiffany was right there, circling her like a shark, the phone camera capturing every angle of my mother's theatrics. "You see this, guys?" Tiffany narrated to her live stream. "This is real pain. This is what money does to people. Look at her, standing there in that expensive dress, looking at her own mother on the floor and not even shedding a tear. She is a monster." My father stepped up next. He ignored his wife on the floor and marched straight up to Julian. He assumed, correctly, that the man in the bespoke Italian suit standing next to me was the boss. "Are you the one in charge here?" my father demanded, jabbing a finger toward Julian's chest. Julian looked at the finger, then at my father's face, with an expression of mild curiosity, as if he were observing a new species of insect. "I am the CEO, yes." "Well, you need to know who you are employing," my father bellowed. He turned to face the room, addressing the crowd of billionaires and investors. This woman here, who do you call a genius? She is a thief. She stole her family's life savings. She abandoned her sick parents. She thinks that because she has a fancy job, she is better than where she came from." The murmurs started. I saw cameras flashing, the press, realizing that the boring business story had just turned into a scandalous human interest drama. We're scrambling to get a better view. "Dad," I said. It was the first time I had spoken. My voice was calm, conversational. "Please stop screaming. You are embarrassing yourself." "Am I embarrassing myself?" my father roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "You are the one who should be ashamed. Look at your sister. She has to sell her clothes to buy food. Look at your mother. She is on her knees begging for your love." Tiffany shoved the phone into my face. The ring light blinded me for a second. "Say something to the fans." "Noelle," she hissed. "Tell them why you hate your family. Tell them why you think you are too good to help us pay the rent. Or better yet, tell them about the check you are going to write us right now to make this go away." I looked into the lens of the camera. I saw the scrolling chat on her screen. Thousands of people were watching. "Send the money," one comment read. "Heartless witch," read another. My mother, realizing the attention was shifting to Tiffany, let out a fresh wail. "I just want my daughter back. I don't care about the money. I just want us to be a family again. Noelle, please, just apologize and come home. We can forgive you." She reached out and grabbed the hem of my midnight blue dress with her fake nails. I looked down at her hand. It was a violation. It was the physical manifestation of the clawing, dragging weight they had placed on me for decades. Arthur Sterling stepped forward. He moved with the grace of a panther. He placed himself slightly in front of me, not to hide me, but to signal an alliance. "Mr. Harrow," Arthur said, his voice deep and authoritative, "I suggest you lower your voice. You are disturbing the guests." "Who are you?" my father sneered. "Another one of her sugar daddies? You stay out of this, old man. This is family business." The room gasped. Insulting Arthur Sterling in the tech world was like insulting the Pope in the Vatican. Arthur didn't blink, he just smiled. A cold, terrifying smile. "I am the chairman of the board," Arthur said, "and you are trespassing on private property. However, Ms. Harrow has requested that we hear you out. So, let us be clear. You are claiming that your daughter, our chief technology officer, has stolen money from you, and that you are destitute because of her actions?" "Yes," my mother cried from the floor. Sensing an opening, she scrambled to her feet, adjusting her sequins. "She managed our accounts. She took everything. We have nothing. We are about to lose our house because of her greed." "And you?" Arthur turned to Tiffany. "You claim she abandoned you?" "She ghosted us," Tiffany said, lip-syncing her sadness to the camera. "She cut off our emergency funds. She left us to rot." "So you are here for justice?" Arthur asked. "We are here for what is ours," my father declared. "We want the $50,000 she stole, and we want a public apology, right now, or we will sue this company for everything it is worth." The ultimatum hung in the air. $50,000. The room was silent. Everyone was looking at me. They were waiting for me to break. They were waiting for the young female executive to crumble under the pressure of her emotional, chaotic family. They expected me to pull out a checkbook to save face. They expected me to run out of the room in tears. I looked at Julian. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. I looked at Arthur. He stepped back, giving me the floor. I looked at my parents. They were panting slightly, their eyes gleaming with triumph. They thought they had won. They thought the silence was the sound of my defeat. I slowly reached up and unclipped the lapel microphone from my dress. I held it in my hand. Then, I looked toward the sound booth at the back of the room, where the technician was waiting for my signal. I raised my hand. The house lights dimmed. The room plunged into a dramatic twilight, illuminated only by the spotlights that were now trained on me and my family. "You want to talk about the truth?" I said into the microphone. My voice didn't shake. It was amplified by the $1 million sound system, booming off the vaulted ceiling, filling every corner of the massive hall. It wasn't the voice of a daughter. It was the voice of a deity handing down a verdict. "You want to talk about money?" I continued, taking a step toward them. "You want to tell these good people, and the thousands watching on your live stream, exactly where the money went?" "Don't you dare try to spin this!" my father shouted, though he looked suddenly uncertain as the spotlight hit him. "I am not spinning anything," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. "You came here to tell a story. You dragged your drama onto my stage. So now, you are going to finish the performance." I turned my back to them and faced the massive IMAX-sized screen that dominated the wall behind the stage. Until now, it had been displaying the Etheria logo. "Turn it on," I commanded. The screen flickered, the logo vanished. And in its place, the first slide of the presentation appeared. It was 10 feet tall, it was bright, and it was devastating. "Let's play," I whispered. The screen behind me did not just turn on. It illuminated the room with the blinding, sterile white light of absolute transparency, the Etheria Systems logo, a symbol of complex neural networks and futuristic possibilities, dissolved into pixels. In its place, a stark, black-and-white graph appeared. It was a timeline, sharp and jagged, stretching across the 500-inch display like a scar. Arthur Sterling stepped up to the podium. He adjusted the microphone stand with a slow, deliberate movement. The room was so quiet that the sound of his cufflinks clinking against the metal echoed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Arthur began, his voice calm but carrying the weight of a gavel striking a block. "We are here to celebrate a financial triumph, but before we can toast to the future, we must address the present accusation. We have been told tonight that our chief technology officer is a thief. We have been told she abandoned her family. We have been told she left them to starve." He paused, looking down at my parents, who were standing frozen in the spotlight, blinking up at the screen like deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. "At Etheria, we believe in data," Arthur continued. We believe that numbers do not lie. People lie. Tears lie. Influencers lie. But the blockchain? Bank transfers? They tell the truth. Arthur raised a remote control and clicked. The graph on the screen surged upward. A massive, bold figure appeared in the center of the display, red against the white background. $450,000. This, Arthur announced, gesturing to the screen, is the total sum of money transferred from Noelle Harrow's personal accounts to the accounts of Robert, Susan, and Tiffany Harrow over the last 10 years. A gasp rippled through the ballroom. It wasn't a polite gasp. It was the shocked intake of breath from a room full of people who understood the value of money. $450,000 was not pocket change. It was a house. It was a retirement fund. It was a life. $450,000, Arthur repeated, savoring the syllables. That is an average of $45,000 a year. That is a post-tax income. That is more than the median individual income in this country, and yet, we are told the family is starving. My father's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked at the number, terrified, as if the digits were physically assaulting him. But surely, Arthur said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy, surely this money was used for essentials, for medical bills, for the survival of the family? He clicked the remote again. The screen shifted, the single number vanished, replaced by a scrolling list of transaction categories. It looked like a credit card statement from hell. Let us examine the essentials, Arthur narrated. Item 1, he read. July 2023, $4,000. Recipient, Pause and Reflect Luxury Dog Spa. Description, Chakra Realignment Therapy for French Bulldog. A ripple of laughter broke out in the back of the room. It was nervous laughter, the kind that happens when people witness something absurd. Item 2, Arthur continued, his voice rising. October 2023, $12,000. Recipient, Hermes Boutique. Description, Birkin bag, ostrich leather. Tiffany gasped. She instinctively pulled her fake fur coat tighter around herself, as if trying to hide the very lifestyle she had flaunted. Item 3, Arthur read, and this time his voice was hard. January 2024, $25,000. Recipient, Crypto Moon Investments. Status, liquidation value 0. Description, investment in speculative meme coin recommended by Reddit. The laughter died. The room turned cold. This wasn't just frivolity. It was negligence. You said she stole from you, Arthur said, looking directly at my father. But it appears, Mr. Harrow, that you and your wife have been living the lifestyle of millionaires on the salary of a woman you claim abandoned you. That is private information, my father shouted, finding his voice at last. You can't show that. That is illegal. It is not illegal when the account holder, your daughter, authorizes the release of her own financial records to defend herself against public defamation. Arthur replied smoothly. You opened the door, sir. We are just walking through it. Arthur clicked the remote again. But the most damning evidence, Arthur said, is not the spending, it is the timing. The screen split in two. On the left side, a video began to play. It was one of Tiffany's TikToks from 3 months ago. In the video, she was crying, claiming that they couldn't afford to fix the boiler in the winter and that I refused to help. We are freezing, the digital Tiffany sobbed on the giant screen. My sister won't answer my calls. I just don't know why she hates us. On the right side of the screen, a bank transfer receipt appeared. The date on the receipt matched the date of the video perfectly. November 12th, 2025. Amount transferred, $5,000. Memo. For the boiler fix, please stay warm. Love, Noelle. The juxtaposition was brutal. On the left, the lie. On the right, the receipt. You posted a video claiming you were freezing, Arthur said to Tiffany. Exactly 2 hours after your sister sent you $5,000 to fix the problem. And looking at the expenditure report for the following day, A new line appeared under the receipt. November 13th, 2025. Transaction, $5,000. Recipient, VIP table, Club Inferno. You didn't fix the boiler, Arthur said. You went clubbing. The crowd turned on them. I could feel the shift in the air. The pity was gone. The confusion was gone. It was replaced by disgust. The journalists were typing furiously on their phones. The investors were shaking their heads. Tiffany was frantically tapping on her phone screen. I knew what she was doing. She was trying to end the live stream. She was trying to cut the feed. It is too late, Ms. Harrow, I said into my lapel mic. My voice cut through the murmurs. You can stop the broadcast, but you can't stop the signal. There are 10,000 people watching right now. They saw the receipt. They saw the lie. The internet never forgets. Tiffany looked up at me, her face a mask of pure terror. Her phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the floor. The gimbal stabilizer rolled away, the ring light flickering out. We were saving it, my mother shrieked, her voice cracking. She stepped forward, wringing her hands, trying to pivot to a new lie. We didn't spend it all. We were holding it for her. We knew she was irresponsible with money, so we invested it. We were keeping it safe for her future. We are good parents. Holding it for her? Arthur asked, his eyebrows raising. You were protecting her? Yes, my father grasped at the lifeline. We are her guardians. We just wanted to teach her the value of money. We love her. You love her, Arthur repeated flatly. We adore her, my mother cried. She is our baby. Then explain this, Arthur said. He hit the button on the remote one last time. The financial data vanished. The split screen vanished. The entire 500-inch screen turned black for a second. Then, a single image appeared. It was a screenshot of a text message. It was blown up to the size of a billboard. Every pixel was sharp. Every letter was 10 feet tall. The sender, loving family. The date, last Tuesday. The text, don't expect help. Dad and I are busy helping Tiffany decorate. You are grown up. Call roadside assistance yourself. Don't bother us and do not disturb your sister's joy. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was a vacuum. Arthur read the text aloud, his voice devoid of emotion, letting the cruelty of the words hang in the air like smoke. Don't expect help. He looked at my parents. Your daughter called you, Arthur said. She was stranded in a blizzard. Her car had failed. She was alone in freezing temperatures. She called you for help. And this was your response. My mother stared at the screen. Her mouth hung open. She couldn't deny it. Her name was on it. Her words were on it. You were busy decorating, Arthur said, his voice dripping with disdain. You prioritized throwing pillows over your daughter's safety. I didn't know it was a blizzard, my mother stammered, her voice barely a whisper. I thought she was just being dramatic. You told her not to disturb her sister's joy, I said. I stepped forward, moving out of the shadow of the podium. I walked until I was standing right at the edge of the stage, looking down at them. The height difference made them look small. The evidence behind me made them look microscopic. I was standing in the snow, I told them. And I told the room. I had just received my doctorate. I had no one. I thought I was going to freeze to death in that car. And you texted me to tell me I was a nuisance. Noelle, please, my father wheezed. He looked like he was shrinking inside his rented tuxedo. It was a misunderstanding. We were stressed. You weren't stressed, I said. You were indifferent, and that is worse. I pointed to the screen. That text message, I said, was the moment I died. The daughter you could manipulate? She froze to death in that car. The woman standing in front of you? She is the one who survived. And she is the one who owns the company you are trying to sue. I turned to the audience. These people claim I owe them, I said. They claim I am in their debt, but the ledger on the screen says otherwise. I have paid for their house. I have paid for their cars. I have paid for their mistakes. I have paid $450,000 for a love that never existed. I looked back at Tiffany. She was on her knees, trying to pick up her phone, her hands shaking so hard she couldn't grip it. The live stream is still running. Tiffany, I said coldly. The comments are reading the text message. Do you want to know what they are saying? I pulled out my own phone and glanced at the screen. They are saying, worst parents ever. They are saying, I hope she sues them. They are saying, Tiffany is a leech. Stop it, Tiffany screamed, covering her ears. Stop reading them. You wanted viral fame, I said. You have it. You are trending worldwide, but not as a victim. You are trending as the definition of ungrateful. My mother looked around the room, searching for an ally. She looked at the billionaires, the journalists, the waiters, but there was no sympathy. There was only judgment. Thousands of eyes were boring into her, stripping away the facade of the grieving mother and revealing the parasite underneath. We can explain. My mother tried one last time, addressing the crowd. She is ungrateful. We gave her life. And I gave you a lifestyle, I shot back. And today, I am taking it back. Arthur stepped forward again. I think we have seen enough, he said. The evidence is conclusive. The plaintiff has no case. The court of public opinion has reached a verdict. He looked at the security team stationed at the edges of the room. But we are not done yet, Arthur said. Because while we were reviewing these financials, we found something else, something that makes this not just a family dispute, but a legal matter. He gestured to the side of the stage. My lawyer, Marcus, walked out. He wasn't carrying a remote. He was carrying a stack of papers with red wax seals. Mr. and Mrs. Harrow, Marcus said, his voice projecting clearly without a microphone. I am serving you with a court order. My parents looked at the papers as if they were grenades. What is this? My father asked. This, I said, is the part where you find out that actions have consequences. The silence that followed the revelation of the text message was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of judgment. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket that settled over the ballroom, pressing down on the three people standing in the center of the spotlight. I watched the faces of the audience. A few minutes ago, they had looked at my family with confusion or perhaps a vague sense of pity. Now, their expressions had hardened into something far more damaging. They were looking at my parents and my sister with visceral disgust. In the world of high finance and brutal business, ruthlessness was understood, but pettiness, cruelty to one's own child during a crisis, that was a social death sentence. My mother seemed to shrink physically. The sequins on her dress, which had seemed so bright moments ago, now looked cheap and tawdry under the unforgiving glare of the house lights. My father was sweating profusely, his eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit that did not exist. I took a step forward. The click of my heels on the stage floor echoed like a gunshot. You came here today to shame an employee, I said, my voice cutting through the air, cool and sharp. You told the press, and the world, that I was a high-level manager who had forgotten her roots. You thought that by attacking my job, you could force my boss to fire me to save the company's reputation. I turned to Julian, who was standing to my right with his arms crossed, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. Julian, I said, do I have a boss? Julian smiled. It was not a warm smile. No, Noel, you do not. You answer only to the board and the shareholders. I turned back to my parents. They looked confused. You went to the wrong building, Dad, I said, my tone almost conversational, which made it all the more terrifying. You went to the office where I was an intern 8 years ago. You didn't know where I worked because you never asked. You never cared. I paused, letting the words land. I am not an employee of Etheria Systems, I announced, raising my chin. I wrote the core code. I designed neural architecture. I am the co-founder and the chief technology officer of this company. A gasp went through the room, followed by a ripple of applause from the engineers in the back who had waited years for me to step into the light. My parents looked as if I had just spoken in an alien language. Co-founder? My mother whispered, the color draining from her face. But that means I didn't just get a bonus today. I interrupted her. It means I own the company. I gestured to the screen behind me, where the stock ticker was still displayed in the corner. The IPO closed at $45 a share. I told them, my personal equity in Etheria is currently valued at over $20 million. My father's knees actually buckled. He grabbed Tiffany's shoulder to steady himself. $20 million. It was a number so large it broke his understanding of reality. I saw the greed flash in his eyes, a sudden, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, they could still claim a piece of it. 20 million, my father stammered, a sick smile trying to form on his lips. Noelle, honey, that is wonderful. We are rich. We? I laughed. It was a harsh, dry sound. There is no we, there is me, and there is you. I walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at them with absolute coldness. The money I made today is enough to buy the entire neighborhood you live in, I said softly. It is enough to buy your house, your cars, and every dream you ever had, 100 times over. But hear me clearly, not one single cent of that money will ever touch your hands. You will not see a penny. You will not see a crumb. My mother let out a choked sob. But we are family. Family helps each other in blizzards, I replied. You made it clear that we are not family. We are a business transaction that has been terminated. I nodded to Marcus, my lawyer. He stepped down from the stage, moving with the inevitability of a glacier. He walked straight up to Tiffany, who was still kneeling on the floor, staring blankly at her broken phone. Tiffany Harrow, Marcus said, his voice projecting to the back of the room. I am serving you with a formal complaint filed with the district court. He thrust a thick stack of documents into her trembling hands. You are being sued for defamation of character, libel, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Marcus listed the charges like he was reading a grocery list. We are also filing criminal charges for extortion, based on the text messages you sent demanding $50,000 in exchange for silence. The evidence has already been submitted to the district attorney. Tiffany looked down at the papers. Jail? She squeaked. I can't go to jail. I'm an influencer. Not anymore, Marcus said. Now you are a defendant. My father stepped in front of her, trying to regain some semblance of control. You can't do this. She is your sister. And we need that money. We have debts. Ah, yes. Arthur Sterling spoke up from behind me. The debts. Arthur walked forward. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, like a headmaster addressing a particularly dim-witted student. We know about Mr. Varga, Arthur said. The name hit my parents like a physical blow. My father went pale gray. My mother covered her mouth with her hands. You know? My father whispered. We know that Tiffany borrowed $50,000 from a predatory loan shark to invest in a pyramid scheme, Arthur explained to the room, ensuring everyone heard the sordid details. And we know that you, Robert and Susan, co-signed the loan. You put your home up as collateral. Arthur pulled a document from his jacket pocket. The loan was due at midnight tonight, Arthur said. Mr. Varga was preparing to foreclose. He was quite eager to take your house. He told me the land value alone is worth 3 times the debt. Please, my mother begged, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup completely. Please, sir, save us. We will lose everything. That house is all we have. It was all you had, Arthur corrected. But you gambled it on your daughter's vanity. He held up the paper. However, Etheria Systems prefers to keep its executive team's affairs tidy. So, I bought the debt. My parents' eyes widened. Hope, cruel and pathetic, flooded back into their faces. You bought it? My mother cried. Oh, thank God, thank you. Noelle, you saved us. I knew you wouldn't let us be homeless. I watched them celebrate for exactly 3 seconds. I wanted them to feel relief before I crushed it. I didn't save you, I said. I acquired you. Arthur handed the document to me. I held it up. This is the deed to the house at 42 Oak Street, I said. I am now the sole owner of the property. I am your creditor, and unlike Mr. Varga, I do not want interest payments. I do not want extensions. I ripped the paper in half. I want the asset, I declared. What? My father gasped. The foreclosure process begins immediately, I said. In fact, I believe the eviction notice is being posted on your front door as we speak. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. You can't do that, Tiffany shrieked, scrambling to her feet. Where are we supposed to go? I don't know, I said, mimicking the tone of my mother's text message perfectly. You are grown up. Figure it out. Don't disturb my joy. Arthur leaned into the microphone. And just so there is no confusion, Mr. Varga is a businessman who likes to ensure his transactions are finalized. He is waiting outside in the lobby with his associates. He wanted to personally confirm that his obligation to you is ended and that you understand your answer to Miss Harrow. I suggest you do not keep him waiting. He gets impatient. The realization hit them all at once. It was a total, catastrophic systems failure. They had no money. They had no home. They had no reputation. They were facing lawsuits, eviction, and a loan shark who was waiting outside to intimidate them one last time. The illusion of their unity shattered. Tiffany turned on my mother. Her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "This is your fault," she screamed, shoving my mother hard. "You told me to do it. You told me the investment was safe. You told me Noelle would pay for it. You stupid old woman." "Don't you touch your mother," my father yelled, grabbing Tiffany's arm. "Get off me," Tiffany shrieked, clawing at his face. "You gambled my inheritance. You are a loser, Dad, a loser." "We gave you everything," my mother wailed, hitting Tiffany with her fake gold clutch. "We spoiled you rotten, and this is how you repay us?" It was grotesque. They were tearing each other apart, physically and verbally, right there on the velvet carpet of the Ritz-Carlton. The mask of the loving family had fallen off, revealing the rats fighting in a sack underneath. The audience watched in horrified fascination. It was the ugliest thing I had ever seen, and yet I couldn't look away. It was the confirmation I needed. They didn't love anyone. They only loved survival. "Get them out of here," I said to the head of security. "They are ruining the party." 4 large security guards moved in. They didn't use excessive force, but they were firm. They grabbed my father by the arms. They took Tiffany by the elbows. "No, wait," Tiffany screamed, kicking her legs as she was lifted off the ground. "Noelle, I'm sorry. I love you. Please, sister, don't let them take me." "I am not your sister," I said, my voice cold as the grave. "I am the victim you forgot to kill." My mother was weeping, dragging her feet as she was pulled toward the exit. "Noelle, we are your parents. You owe us." "I paid in full," I said. The guards dragged them toward the double doors. The crowd parted again, not out of fear this time, but to avoid being touched by the contagion of their failure. As they reached the doors, my father looked back one last time. His eyes met mine. There was no anger left in them, only the hollow, terrifying realization of what he had thrown away. He saw the daughter who would have given him the world, standing in a gown worth more than his life, looking at him like he was a stranger. The doors slammed shut. The noise of their screaming was cut off instantly. The ballroom was silent. I stood there, breathing hard. My heart was pounding against my ribs. But for the first time in 30 years, it wasn't pounding with fear. It was pounding with the rush of adrenaline, of victory, of absolute, terrifying freedom. I looked at the torn pieces of the deed in my hand. I let them drop to the floor. It was done. The heavy mahogany doors clicked shut, sealing the toxicity outside. The sound was final, like the closing of a tomb, for a heartbeat. The ballroom remained in a state of suspended animation. The air was still vibrating with the echoes of screaming and the ugly, raw sound of a family shattering into pieces. I stood alone on the stage, the adrenaline beginning to ebb, leaving behind a strange, hollow trembling in my hands. I looked out at the sea of faces, faces that belonged to the titans of industry. the shapers of the future, people who controlled billions of dollars. I expected them to look away. I expected them to return to their conversations, to politely ignore the messy human drama that had just unfolded in their sanctuary of wealth. I was wrong. It started with Arthur Sterling. He began to clap. It wasn't the polite golf clap of a board meeting. It was a slow, heavy, rhythmic applause that commanded attention. Then Julian joined in. Then the engineers from the back of the room. Then the investors. Within 10 seconds, the entire ballroom had erupted. It was a standing ovation. They weren't cheering for the stock price. They weren't cheering for the IPO. They were cheering for the exorcism. They were cheering for the woman who had finally found the strength to cut the cancer out of her life. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of lilies and champagne, and for the first time in 32 years, the air didn't taste like guilt. I offered a small, genuine smile to the room, gave a slight nod of gratitude, and stepped down from the stage. The party resumed, but the energy had changed. The superficial chatter was gone. People came up to me, not to ask about neural networks or profit margins, but to shake my hand and look me in the eye. "Bravo," a competitor from Silicon Valley whispered as he passed me. "That was the most bullish signal I've ever seen," a hedge fund manager told me, clinking his glass against mine. "A leader who can make the hard calls." But I didn't stay in the spotlight. I had one more transaction to finalize, one that didn't involve vengeance, but gratitude. I slipped away from the main crowd and made my way to the green room behind the stage. Sitting there, looking small on a velvet sofa, was Aunt Helen. She was holding a cup of tea, her eyes red-rimmed but bright. She had watched the whole thing on the monitor. "Auntie," I said softly. She looked up and stood quickly, pulling me into a hug that smelled of lavender laundry detergent and safety. It was the only hug in my family that had ever felt real. "You did it, kid," she whispered into my hair. "You really did it. Your grandfather would be dancing right now." "I couldn't have done it without you," I said, pulling back to look at her. "You were my eyes and ears. You were the only one who told me the truth." I reached into my clutch and pulled out an envelope. It was much smaller than the legal documents I had served to my sister, but it carried far more weight. "What is this?" Helen asked, eyeing it suspiciously. "Open it," I said. She opened the envelope and pulled out a cashier's check. I watched her eyes widen behind her reading glasses. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Noelle," she stammered. This is too many zeros. Is this a mistake?" "It is not a mistake," I said, taking her hand. "It is $500,000. It is enough for you to buy that cottage in Maine you always talk about, the one near the lighthouse. It is enough for you to retire. You don't have to clean houses anymore. Auntie, you are done." "I can't take this," she said, trying to push it back into my hand. "I helped you because I love you, not for a payday." "I know," I said, closing her fingers around the check. "That is exactly why you deserve it. Everyone else in my life had a price tag. You were the only one who was priceless. Please take it. Consider it my first act of philanthropy as a wealthy woman. Do not make me argue with you. You know I win arguments now." Helen laughed through her tears. She hugged me again, tighter this time. "I am going to miss the drama next door," she joked weakly. "But I think I will prefer the ocean view." "Go," I told her. "Pack your bags tonight. Don't tell them where you're going. Just vanish, like I did." I watched her leave through the side exit, clutching her future in her hand. A warm sense of closure settled in my chest. The scales were finally balanced. The wicked had been punished, and the righteous had been rewarded. The next few months were a blur of legal proceedings and corporate expansion, but I kept tabs on the fallout. I didn't obsess over it, but I needed to know the end of the story. The foreclosure on 42 Oak Street was swift and merciless. My lawyer, Marcus, handled it with the efficiency of a surgeon. My parents were given 24 hours to vacate. They left the house in shambles, stripping the copper wiring from the walls in a last, petty attempt to salvage some value. But it didn't matter. I bulldozed the house a week later. I didn't sell the land. I turned it into a community garden. where a monument to greed once stood. Wildflowers and vegetables now grew for families who actually needed them. Tiffany's trial was short. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge, a stern woman who had zero patience for influencer culture, sentenced her to 500 hours of community service and 3 years of probation. The last I heard, the girl who refused to be seen without a filter was currently picking up trash along the interstate highway, wearing a neon orange vest that definitely did not fit her aesthetic. Her social media accounts were permanently banned for violating terms of service regarding harassment and extortion. She was digitally erased. As for my parents, reality hit them the hardest. Without my funding, without the house, and with a credit score that had been incinerated. They had to enter the workforce at 60 years old. They moved into a cramped, one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. My father, the man who thought he was too good to ask for directions, now worked as a greeter at a discount warehouse store. My mother, who used to look down on service workers, got a job as a cashier at a supermarket. Aunt Helen told me, before she changed her number and moved to Maine, that they tried to spin it as a tragedy to their neighbors, but no one bought it. The live stream had been too viral. Everyone knew. When people saw them scanning groceries, they didn't see victims. They saw the people who texted, "Don't expect help," to a stranded daughter. They tried to reach out, of course. For the first month, letters arrived at Etheria headquarters. They were long, rambling mixtures of guilt-tripping and begging. "We are old," one letter said. "We are tired. Have you no mercy?" I didn't open them. I had Elena, my assistant, run them through the shredder. I didn't block their numbers because I had changed mine the night of the gala. I was a ghost to them now, a memory of a resource they had squandered. They were screaming into a void, and the void was not listening. 6 months after the gala, on a crisp autumn evening, I found myself standing on the observation deck of the new Etheria Systems headquarters. We had moved into a skyscraper that pierced the clouds, a structure of glass and steel that symbolized everything we had built. The city was spread out below me, a grid of golden light stretching to the horizon. The wind was cold, biting at my cheeks, reminding me of that night in the blizzard, but I wasn't cold. I was wrapped in a cashmere coat that cost more than my old car. I was warm. I was safe. The glass door behind me slid open. I didn't turn around. I knew the footsteps. "I thought I would find you here," a voice said. It was David, my CFO, the man who had made the call that changed my life, the man who had told me I was free. He walked up to the railing and stood beside me. He held 2 crystal flutes of vintage champagne. The bubbles rose in the glass, golden and frantic. "To the quarterly earnings," David said, handing me a glass. "We beat projections by 20%. The market is calling you the new oracle of tech." I took the glass but didn't drink. I looked out at the city, watching the red taillights of cars flowing like blood through the arteries of the streets. Somewhere down there, in a cheap apartment, my parents were probably arguing over whose turn it was to pay the electric bill. "David," I said quietly. "Yes, Noelle? Do you remember the night you called me? The night of the blizzard?" David nodded, his expression serious. "I remember. You sounded like you were saying goodbye." I said. I was saying goodbye to a version of myself that I hated, the version that needed them. David took a sip of his champagne. He turned to look at me, his eyes searching my face. "Do you have any regrets?" he asked. "How did you handle it? About the gala?" It was explosive. I thought about the question. I let my mind travel back to the little girl who sat on the stairs, listening to her parents praise her sister while she did her homework alone. I thought about the teenager who worked 2 jobs. I thought about the woman shivering in the snow, waiting for a tow truck that was never coming. I looked at the scar on my palm where I had gripped the steering wheel so hard my nails had dug into the skin. Did I regret destroying them? Did I regret the public shaming? Did I regret the fact that my mother was now scanning coupons for strangers? I felt guilty. I searched for it deep in my gut, but it wasn't there. In its place was a profound, quiet peace. It was the peace of a survivor who had finally put down the heavy load she had been carrying up a mountain for 30 years. "No," I said, my voice steady and clear against the wind. "I don't regret what I did. I don't regret the gala. I don't regret the lawsuit." I raised my glass to the city, to the future, to the infinite possibilities of a life that was finally, truly mine. "I only have one regret, David," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "What is that?" "I regret that I didn't send a text message of my own sooner," I said. "I regret that I didn't text them 10 years ago and say, 'Don't expect help.'" David laughed, a warm, rich sound. He clinked his glass against mine. "Well," he said, "better late than never. To freedom." To come. "Freedom," I echoed. I drank champagne. It tasted like stars. I turned my back on the view, the city, and the past. I turned toward the warm light spilling out from the office behind me. Inside, there were people laughing. There was Arthur, holding court with a group of young developers. There was Julian, planning our next conquest. There were people who respected me, people who valued me, people who brought things to the table instead of just taking from it. I walked through the glass doors and into the light. The cold was behind me. The winter was over, and for Noel Harrow, the spring had just begun. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal and justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening on your commute? While cooking dinner? Or maybe relaxing before bed? Please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Noel's revenge. If you enjoyed seeing karma served cold, please make sure to subscribe to the Family Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people who need to hear that it is okay to walk away from toxicity. Stay strong, and see you in the next story.